On.
Welcome to the Sweaty Health Podcast. We are now 4 weeks in to the self-quarantine. There is somewhat of an end in sight as the world may be opening up soon. We've been discussing a lot of different topics in the past episodes. One of the first things we talked about, though, was keeping the right mindset to keep your exercise, your nutrition, and just your overall mindset in just in a positive place, in a good place. We also spoke about this extra time that so many of us have as an opportunity to find a hobby or a passion that you've wanted to work on and now have the time to work on. So with that being said, how are you doing? Have you been reading more? Have you been finding that passion or that's something that really has gotten away from you, or how should I say?
I would say, have you started that thing you've been wanting to do for so long but been putting off, right? Have you been doing that? Are you doing that thing that you've been thinking about changing or doing for so long, for maybe the past few months, maybe the past few years, and now that you have the time, are you doing that? And if not, what is still holding you back from doing that, right? Is your mindset in the right space or the place that's going to get you to take action? And I think that is the main reason why we have one of our good friends and one of my first clients, Joe Scaturro. Now, I'd like to let Joe kind of give him a little intro himself, but what I would say is Joe has been an integral part of, being a great friend of mine, but also a mentor of mine that has allowed and helped me move into a direction that I've always wanted to go. He knows how to have the right conversation at the right time, ask the right questions. And I wanted to bring him on this podcast because he is great with mindset. So, Joe, can you give us a little background of who you are and, what you do and why you think I even invited you on this podcast?
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Ross. It's awesome to be here. This is wildly entertaining. So, I'm one of those people that gets hyped up about just talking about anything that someone's trying to do with their life. Good, bad, different. If you're looking for direction, if you're just completely happy with where you're at, I want to talk to you. It's fascinating to see people's journey, right? And I think one of the biggest things is I take such a great pleasure in being a small footnote in anyone's life, right? Like people that I've met along the way, like, oh, Joe, you taught me this, and it helped me with my business. That's better than a paycheck. And one of my last companies that I owned, I had this large marketing company, 250 sales reps and all this stuff. And I was making crazy money. And legitimately, I can say this with my whole heart, is the best part was when someone would come in and go, hey man, I paid my mom's rent this month, right? Because of what I learned here, and the opportunity that I was given, that's more important because that has a lasting effect, right?
Yeah.
I had an old employer and he used to tell me, he was like, if you do a contest for your employees, he's like, don't give them out cash because people spend cash and it disappears. He's like, do a prize that they'll actually have and use. Give them a microwave, give them a washing machine, because every time they'll use that washing machine, you'll be a part of their life for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. He's like, you'll have a more of a lasting impact. And I thought that was fascinating. And, he had his own reasons for doing it, obviously, because you're trying to make the employees love you and work there and all that stuff. But the underlying good that it did was always pretty cool. And I'm someone that has made a ton of mistakes in life. I have blown tons of money. I've made a bunch. I've done both sides, right? And some with a little luck and some with actual brilliance and some out of stupidity. Some of these things came, and really the steady thing that's gone through it is when everything went either good or bad, how I was reacting, which I think is where we're coming into your mindset. And, one of my favorite authors, Jack Canfield, talks about being an inverse paranoid, right? Instead of being convinced that the world's out to do you harm, your job, you become convinced that the world's out to do you good no matter what happens to you. It's your job to figure out how, right? And one of the references he gives is like, if you're a woman, you get a flat tire. Well, instead of being like so scared that the person that's going to come help you is going to kill you or murder you on the side of the road, maybe that's the guy you're supposed to meet, right? Like, maybe that's the Mr. Charming you've waited your whole life for. Now here he is. So I kind of take that approach with everything, whether it's like I'm running late for something, well, I'm avoiding an accident, it's whatever it is, I find the silver lining. And honestly, I don't know how people do it the other way, right?
And that's a main reason why I had you on this podcast, because I feel like for myself, I can fall into the mentality of the other way and Ross and I were talking about this week, as me asking the question why to myself all the time. Well, why me? Why is this happening? Why does this keep happening? Or, I'm not asking myself, the what question, like, what should I be doing about this? What can I change? What can I control? And, that kind of gets into, understanding your mindset and allowing us to accept the situation and then moving forward with it. And I think you know how to accept the situation a lot quicker than most people. Like, for example, with this COVID-19, I felt like I'm such a go-getter, a hustler when it comes to work. I want to work. And, I'd never want to take days off. And as soon as COVID-19 happened, I went through almost like what it was to be an addict of some sort, and went through every stage. And I couldn't accept that clients weren't training. I wasn't working. I didn't have a schedule. And that was really tough for me. And it wasn't until a few weeks in where I accepted it. And, Ross and I kind of started this. I got creative. I worked with other friends, and I started enjoying my time, and I feel like you definitely have a mindset or, thoughts on how to accept quicker than most.
Well, it's two parts, right? Like, think about this. You think Jordan ever, when he got past the ball with 5 seconds left, like said, why is all the pressure on me? Why do I have to come through right now? Or did he, love it, right? And for me personally, like, when things go wrong, I honestly feel like that's my niche, right? Like, that's my shit. Everybody else is going to falter. Everyone else is going to lose their mind. And I'm going to stay cool, and I'm going to come through because I'm awesome at this when things go wrong. And, like, it's like my claim to fame. Like, unfortunately, there's a part of me that feels like I'm more comfortable with chaos than I am when things are going well, because, like, my back against the wall, like, that's my comfort zone.
Well, Joe, isn't this kind of the definition of, like, the growth mindset, where it's loosely based off failure? You fail, but you immediately say, what did I do wrong? You push past it. You don't really even see it as a failure. You see it as like a teaching point, and you push right past it, and you do it better the next time. And you accept this idea that you're going to do something wrong again, but you don't take it personally to yourself. And I think to piggyback on what you were saying, we talked about this, Scott. We're asking the wrong whys. We're saying, why am I doing it wrong? It's really about, why am I doing what I'm doing? Michael Jordan would say, I want to be the greatest basketball player of all time. That's his why. But when he screws something up or he didn't have a good game, he didn't say, why didn't I have a good game? He just said, I'm going to do better tomorrow. I didn't do good today. My overall goal is to be the greatest of all time, and this is not going to stop me, and it's not going to slow me down.
Although I think the thing about that is that not everyone is like that. And to think the way, I guess, Jordan or Joe is thinking and stay so positive, I'm sure there's definitely different, bullet points on how we can help that. But, like, I don't think you can change the way a person is. I think you can help change their mindset so like they can accept it and then move forward. I don't think you're going to change who they are or no. I don't know.
Well, like, one of my favorite people, right, is like David Goggins, and he constantly talks about, like, the man he is today is not the man he was, right? He was the Mr. Excuse. He was the, fat guy, all those things, and that he made active decisions to change that so he'd be a different person. And honestly, like the man I am today is a direct relation to years of failing at like trying to get up early and sucking at it, right? Like trying to run my own business and not understanding finances, right? Like all those things. I don't remember where I read it, but it's always one of those favorite things that pops in my head is that like failure is the prerequisite for success, right? So like, how do you look at your failures? I just look at them as like classes I had to take in college, right? Like I had to learn this. Okay, cool. Now I get to move on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember, and we go back to mindset again, like years ago, I had moved back from Florida. I was trying to start this new business. I'm staying at my mom's house, and they had taken my old bedroom and turned it into my niece's playroom. So I'm not even staying in my room. I'm staying in like a 4-year-old's playroom with dolls and all this just, man, right? And I am miserable. I am fighting with my sister every day because I'm keeping weird hours and all of this stuff. And until I actually changed my mindset of being there, which was like from like, hey, this sucks to, wow, I'm so lucky I have a place to stay. You know, maybe I should try to be a little more courteous to my sister and this, that, the other thing. And when I kind of accepted the circumstances, when I finally accepted the circumstances and said, you know, this is what it is, and this is what I have to do, all of a sudden I had the money to move out.
Yeah.
You know, it's just funny how everything worked out. And it was just I'm a big believer, once I learn the lesson, right, like the hardship is removed.
Well, you're making a conscious decision to change your perspective on every situation that you approach. So for people who do have some attributes of like a negative mindset where they're always seeing the wrong, you know, maybe one of the tools they can do is like just stop yourself when you say it, recognize it, and just flip it around and say, okay, what's the positive in this situation? Is that how you would counsel someone that would be working under you?
Well, part of it is like, dude, I have to take no credit. And the fact is like, I talked to people about what was going on, you know, and I verbalized my thoughts that were like my victim statements and all this stuff. And someone would stop me and say, hey, wait a minute. You know, did you even think about this? Like their life was awesome until you moved back in, right? So why wouldn't they be pissed? And that's usually the main thing.
Do you put yourself like in the mentality of the devil's advocate all the time?
I try to, as much as possible.
Because for me, you know, I guess when I get into a situation and I'm so passionate or emotional about it or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be about any specific topic. It's very hard to change the way you're thinking when you are in the moment. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like whenever that time of acceptance happens, it's definitely not for me in the moment. It may take a day or two or a few hours or, you know, the next 10 minutes. But if I can figure out how to accelerate that, I feel like I can change the way I think in a lot of situations and have that, you know, be a positive situation rather than dwell and keep dwelling on it and not make a change.
That's just reps. That's all it is, right? You know, the more you do it, the quicker you are to it, right? You know, it's just, and it's, there are times where I fall into a rut, right? And there was a couple of years ago, there was a period where I wasn't like listening to any books. I wasn't doing any self education, and I was, you know, falling back more and more and more. And all of a sudden I felt like, you know, I was just in this rat race again, which is never the way I've ever felt about life or anything I was trying to do. I always felt like I had an advantage because I was going to work harder than other people, and I could make my way through this. But the more I isolated my thoughts and I didn't talk to anyone about them, the worse it got. And that's probably like my biggest strength today is the fact that like I just talk to people about my stuff that's going on. You know, I have friends that are really like in the know of my life, and when I'm off, they sense it, right? Like I don't have to actually say to them like, hey, I'm struggling with something. Like they hear it in my voice, like, what's up, dude? Why aren't you like running 1,000,000 miles an hour? Are you okay? And I think people lose they're like, whoa, what's talking about it gonna fix? It doesn't always fix it, right? Like, but it's the fact that you can get it out there. You can hear your own insanity sometimes, right? Like, what are you afraid of? And you say it out loud and you're like, Jesus Christ, what is wrong with me? That's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But in your head, it's massive. You know, I had a friend that told me one time, he's like, I've been through so much stuff that was horrible right here. You know, and like, he's like, none of it ever came true. You know, so like you start hearing those crazy thoughts,
Yeah.
and you know, and I think we all kind of go through, we put ourselves through these scenarios. Like I remember I came home from work one night, this is years ago, and it's snowing and I'm living at my mom's house. So I start like cleaning the driveway. It's like 10 o'clock at night. First off, I'm a piece of trash from snow blowing at 10 o'clock at night. But, you know, I see my neighbor start to come outside. And I'm like, if this guy comes outside, I will drop him in the street if he's going to give me shit about snow blowing. This is the only time I can do it, blah, blah, blah. I'm on my pity pot about how terrible my life is, and I'm getting enraged. My blood pressure's raging. The guy comes outside, goes to his car, gets something out of it, and goes back inside. It has nothing to do with me, right? Yeah. Meanwhile, I am fuming.
Ready to crush.
I'm ready to fight my neighbor who I've had like 4 conversations with, right? You know, and you think about that insanity, but like how often do we do that? That we ramp up in our heads this scenario and it doesn't even come true. So like you have to start realizing that like your thoughts aren't real.
It's a movie. It's basically like you're creating your own movie. You're the director, producer, writer, actor. And
you're in the Matrix.
It's based on nothing. Yeah. It's not a documentary. It's not based on truth. It's a Hollywood film. Do you have Joe? Do you have rituals like that? For example, I have every morning. I have a 10-minute mandatory where I sit at my laptop and I just write whatever's on my head, and I do. You know, it's things I have to do for the day, emotions I'm feeling, anything. But it's at least 10 minutes, and it can be longer, but it can never be under 10 minutes. Almost like something to just get your thoughts out, like a journaling of some sort. You, Scott, you, Joe, do you have rituals like this to keep yourself in check?
Scott, you want to go first?
I don't have rituals, and I feel like sometimes I feel like I need them, but it's not something that I do. I definitely don't do a ritual thing every single day. Like I brush my teeth. It's not, I don't think that's who I am, but I will say I'm not a list person, but when I do put a list together, I feel like I then do those things rather than keep thinking about them. So it does help me with taking action for sure. But that's really it. I don't really have a ritual that I do every single day for sure.
So I, on a daily basis, I try my best at it, right? I miss some days, but I write my goals, right? I rewrite my goals every day. And it really kind of just reminds me what the heck I'm working for. And I write out my day almost on like a psychopathic like calendar of like time slots, right? Where I'm like, this is going to get done at this time. And it's an outline, right? Like usually 30 minutes, 40 minutes of the day, I'm way off track, right? But it gives me a general idea of like what was going on, what were my plans for. And a lot of it was because I used to think that I was going to get all this stuff done every day. And then the end of the day would come and I got like a third of what I wanted to done, or maybe a 10th. And I'd feel like a failure because I never actually gave myself a realistic chance of what could get done that day. You know, so now when I started to like write things out with like time slots, like that's going to take an hour, that's going to take 2 hours, it actually made me a lot less anxious, you know, because all of a sudden I wasn't like, oh man, it's 3:30, I still have 40 things to do on this list. You know, my to-do list is always way longer than I could ever get done in one day. You know? And another thing, I actually just bought like new little mini notebooks, right? So I could keep them in my pocket because
those are cute.
Yeah, they're adorable, aren't they? So my goal is so I can keep them in my pocket. That way during the day I can go back to my list more. Because a lot of times I'd start leaving my list on my desk and then whatever happens.
And it's better in old school paper, isn't it?
Dude, I love old school paper. I can't.
As we talk here, I have like little note cards I'm just writing on, keep my thoughts in order.
I write notes in my phone constantly and they're just gone. I forget about them. And, you know, back to like talking to people and bringing it out. So this is before the holiday season, I was talking to a friend of mine about like my production levels and what I could do and this, that, the other thing. And he said like, well, would you consider getting another printer? No, he said, what are you going to do if your printer goes down? And I said, dude, we don't talk like that, right? And,
well, Joe, let the listeners know what your business is. I don't think.
Oh, so I have a t-shirt company, right? So I was, and right before the holiday season, that's my big time of the year for retail. So he was like, what are you going to do if your printer goes down? I'm like, we don't talk like that. He's like, no, but seriously, what are you going to do? And long story short, I ended up buying another printer. And what's funny is I went back to my goal list, and for the last 2 years, I had been writing that I owned 3 printers, right? That was one of my goals, was to have 3 printers. But it never clicked in my head that it was the time to do it until I spoke to someone else about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this is something I wrote every day. Like, I want to have 3 printers. I want to have 3 printers. I want to have 3 printers. And then I'm trying to figure out how to get all this work done. And it's not even clicking in my head that, oh, maybe it's time to buy the other printer. You know, and that's why I always go back to is just like a mindset of being open to have people know what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
you know, a lot of that goes into, because Ross and I had a few bullet points about really what we wanted to talk about and how it relates to mindset and a lot of, you know, health and fitness and, you know, getting into an exercise routine. But, you know, we speak about a lot with our clients when it comes to nutrition. We speak about try not to be perfect. It's not about being perfect, but it's about being good enough. And I like to say, you know, start it being 80% or, you know, or good enough when it comes to nutrition.
mm-hmm.
So, you know, I had a conversation with a client of mine's wife yesterday, and we kind of just broke down her entire nutrition and, you know, where she wants to be, what she wants to look like. And then we broke down like her compliance or her consistency when it comes to, you know, eating well. And she then realized that she definitely wasn't even at 80% yet, you know? And then once she was at 80%, the speed at which she wanted to see the results, you're not going to get that at 80%. You need to tighten that 20% up and get down closer to 15 and 10. And then we spoke about, you know, what you can and can't control, right? The realm of control and, you know, how do you know what you can and can't control? And, you know, you're talking about your lists and making it realistic and you're seeing yourself fail. You know, how do you allow yourself to fail, accept it, and then move on? You know, that's definitely a question I would like to ask you. You know, when this quarantine first happened, we had a text conversation. You were asking me all these uncomfortable questions, like business and career, and it got late. It got to be like 10 o'clock, and I go to bed at like 9:30, and I didn't answer you. But it definitely got me thinking of like, what do I want for myself? And that's exactly why I had you on this podcast, is because you do know how to ask those uncomfortable questions. But what is it about you that allows you to get someone else in that right mindset? Can you also do that for yourself? Because I also feel like I am such a great coach that I can help other people. But when it comes to myself, I struggle, you know?
Yeah, the shitty thing about, like, I'll call them demons, right? Like those things in your head that try to make you fail, is they talk to you in your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they come at you with, you know, like a friend and a familiar voice, and they're going to keep you safe. And the thing about your mind is meant to keep you safe from danger. Right. And it's not meant to make you happy. Right. Your primary purpose to your brain is to keep you safe from getting eaten by a wolf. Right. Mm-hmm. Like it's not that so you can feel, you know, fulfilled and all that stuff. And that's really the you know, the struggle of the modern man, right, is like to actually have fulfillment and know his place in the world and all that BS. But what it really comes down to is how much do you want to lie to yourself, right? And that's really where it comes into, like, having sounding boards of other people, you know, and really when I ask people questions, it's great because it makes me ask them myself. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'll say this in all like humor and seriousness, I have such a big ego, right, that I can't tell you that you should be doing something or suggest or give you advice and then not go do it myself.
Too much integrity.
Yeah. You know, you want to say it's integrity. Part of it is like, man, it's self-pride, right? It's like, I want to be the man that I'm trying to help you to be.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really where it goes back to, like, having that network of people, you know. it's funny as I have a friend of mine that gives me great like input on my relationship. And at this point, like when I'm being a jerk, my girlfriend will go, well, have you spoken to Warren? Oh, you know, and but the fact is like he's been married for, you know, X amount of years and has gone through it all, right? And he's talking to me from experience, not from like a preacher's, you know.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the other part too, is like you can't really, you know, that's the whole people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And if you're not in a relationship with someone, if you don't actually know what they're going through and you just start spouting stuff off, you're just a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's usually why, like, when I meet someone, I ask them questions. I want to know where they're at, because like nothing I have matters, right? And it goes back to kind of like my sales background of like learning how to properly qualify a customer, right? Both of you wouldn't, you know, just start someone off like, hey, like today we're going to do power cleans, and they've never worked out in their entire life,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going to kind of get the information on them, see where they're at, and you're going to build something around them. And it's the same thing with having a conversation with someone. You know, my mother's been a great example for me my whole life on how to network. And Scott, we've talked about this a lot, is like, don't be concerned about what they can do for you. See who you could bring them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You meet someone and you just learn about their business. You never know when that's going to pop up, or you're going to, you know, have somebody for them. And my mother always just tell me, is like, send people three referrals. He's like, send them as much business as you can, and don't worry if it never comes back to you, because it will eventually. Just do your part in all of it. So
that's partly meeting people where they're at, and that's a really good point. That's something I struggled early as a trainer, was that I wanted everyone to just become who I was, and I wasn't listening to who they were and where they currently were and where they needed to go, because it wasn't anywhere near where I was, eating, you know, 90% organic foods, exercising 6 days a week. They just needed to have 2 or 3 days of compliance with exercise and make small goals in nutrition, and didn't have to eat organic. So meeting, you know, people where they're at, as far as like us talking to coaches, is a huge thing. And if you are someone that's looking to change, just kind of say, where am I right now? What is my next small steps to bring it up? It's good to look at someone like a role model, like Joe is a successful businessman, or Scott and I as just generally healthy people that have a good healthy lifestyle. But if that's not where you're at, what are the small steps you can take to get to that point? And, you know, as we continue on the conversation about mindset, you know, what is, you know, I don't know. I have a few questions. You know, how do you go about, Joe, this is a good question for you. How would you go about assessing someone and like starting to set some level of goals? Because, you know, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, a lot of podcasts, and you'll hear people say, I don't set goals. I just say, this is what I have to do. This is the action taking forward. But I've always been a big goal guy. Where I've lacked is taking strong action. I'll take very subtle action, not enough. You know this. We know each other personally too. I need to take bigger steps in life. I do push forward. I do challenge myself. But, you know, how do we go about, you know, taking
that leap?
Yeah, those first small steps, and how do we set the correct goals for each individual?
You got a couple things going on there, right?
A lot going on there.
So Brian Tracy, like one of my favorite sales development business people, he literally writes a book about anything, right? Like, you want 21 ways to become a millionaire, he's got that. You want 21 ways to meet and marry the woman of your dreams, get a book for that too. But every one of his books is based around goal setting, right? Like, every book starts off the same. Get a piece of paper, you know, and how will you know you found what you wanted if you don't know what you're looking for, right? Like, I wouldn't call Scott up and be like, Scott, I'm going to come pick you up. And then we're going to drive around for 3 hours. And then during those 3 hours go, hey, Scott, you want to go see a movie? From the beginning, I would have said, hey, Scott, do you want to go see a movie tonight? All right, let's look at movie times. We would have planned it all out, right? Otherwise, we're going to waste gas and time, which neither one of us have. You know, now you can waste gas because gas is like practically free. But you know, we wouldn't do that because it would be so inefficient, but yet people do that with their lives every day, right? Is they're just like, I'm going to drive around for a while and see if anything happens. See if I see something I want to do. Instead of just taking 30 seconds to sit back and like, this is what I want. You know, another thing Brian Tracy talks about is he talks about in one of his books, how people will come up to him after his seminars and go, thank you, Mr. Tracy. After hearing you, I'm going to become a millionaire. And he's like, long story short, he says, like, these people are idiots.
Yeah.
Like, they've had an entire life of financial ruins, and because they heard me speak for 2 hours, they're going to become millionaires. He goes, here's the problem. They're going to go out, and even if they make $200,000 next year, they're going to feel like a failure and give up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's like, so why not set real goals? Like, I'm going to be a thousandaire. I'm going to be a 10,000aire. I'm going to be a 20,000aire. He's like, and get yourself going. Like, yeah, you can have a long-term goal to hit millions, but you have to do things you've never done before first, right? So, like, if you're like, hey, I want to eat a healthy lifestyle, well, what's the most days a week you've ever eaten healthy before? 0? Let's go with 3 this week.
Yes.
Right?
This is you're getting into exactly how we coach nutrition. When it comes down to changing habits in general, right? Far too often people take that they need to change so much of their life. And what happens is, and this gets back to being good enough, not perfect, they think they need to be perfect, and that is not life. They can go through a full week or a full work week of being perfect, trying to eat perfect. And guess what happens? They get tired of cooking. They have friends over. They go out to a party. They go out to dinner. They have a few drinks, and they fall off the rails. And then it snowballs into getting worse and worse and worse. And they go through this vicious cycle of trying to be perfect, whatever diet, fad diet, or trend they're trying to do, and it never works out. What they need to do is focus on one thing at a time, get these small wins under your belt, just like what you're saying, be a 1,000aire, be a 10,000aire, be a 20,000. You need to get these small wins under your belt in order to build that confidence. Because if anything, for me, if a client comes to me after trying all these types of diets, Weight Watchers, anything, and they're coming to me, if they need anything, they just need confidence.
Yeah.
And the way you build that is through trying one thing at a time, like what you're saying. And I'm not talking about it has to be every single day, but in a week, say, I'm going to have 3 cooked meals, and I'm going to cook them, and I'm going to love them, and I'm going to plan them out. Let's do it 3 times this week. And then you do it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then you're like, you know what? I could do it 5 times. And you set that again. And that's how you build lifelong change, right? That's how you build lifelong. And you could talk about this with anything. It doesn't have to be nutrition, but it's a matter of taking some form of action and having some movement there. Because I will talk about this a lot. If you've been wanting to make a change, right? And you've been researching, you've been looking it up, you're saving, you're Pinteresting, you're saving it on Instagram, whatever it is, and you're thinking about it. And there has not been action yet. If nothing has moved, where you're starting or where you think you're starting should not be what you're starting at, right? That starting point should be a different spot for you. So I think it comes down to building these small wins under your belt, giving yourself confidence and being happy with that confidence.
Yeah. So, you know, I have like a self-development group that I'm involved with, right? And we always talk about that as like setting realistic, you know, commitments. And that's something we do on a weekly basis, right? We set a goal, what you're going to get done before next week. And what I've seen happen is like someone will set ridiculous goals. All right. And stuff there's no way they were going to get done because they've never done anything that scale before. And they come in the next week and they feel like a failure. And then the same thing, they do it again. They set these ridiculous goals and they come back the next week and it's a failure. And it goes on for a little bit. And eventually they just stop coming because they get tired of being asked like, so why didn't you do what you said you were going to do? And the problem is not that they're lazy or they're a loser. It's the fact is like they were just trying to do more than they've ever done in their entire life in 1 week and failing. Mm-hmm. And you just can't put that you need the small wins, you know. And for me, like when this all started, when everything started going crazy, I made some commitments around work, and I was like, I'm going to do 8 listings between this week and next week. And, somewhere I kind of said, like, well, can you do more? Da, da, da. And I said, the most I've done in a week in the last 3 months is 3. So if I do 8, that's a tremendous improvement. The following week, I committed to doing 20, and I kept raising it because I actually had but I couldn't just start out and say, well, you know what? I'm going to commit to doing 50 listings this week, because I didn't even know half of the problems I was going to run into doing the 8. Mm-hmm. So you can't set that expectation of like, oh, I'm going to, have $2,000 in the bank at the end of the month when you don't even know how many hours you're going to get for work, right? Like, well, what's the most you ever saved in a month before? $60. Let's go for 90, right? Let's just, you got to kind of treat yourself like a kid, right? And it's the same thing. You go back to like when a kid's walking, right? When they learn how to walk, how many times do they fall? And it's thousands, right? At any point does the parent go over to the kid and go, listen, Scott, walking's not for you. You're going to crawl your whole life. Deal with it, right? Just stay down there. Stop falling. You're going to get hurt, right? No, they said, come on, my kid's going to walk. They pick him up. Let's try it again. Let's pick him up. So if we treated ourselves like children, right, we would walk tall.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about kids too is that they're not in a rush to walk when a baby is, going into a toddler stage. And I think what's the saying? Time is the most valuable commodity, right? That we have.
I think I said that I said that in my, on my wedding. Those were in my vows.
I was going to say, I was pretty sure it's in my vows.
But it doesn't look at any fitness ad. They put time as like lose weight fast, like everything's time oriented.
Yes.
And it's in the wrong way. It's in the wrong direction. It's like, no, this should take time because you're transitioning as a person. Who you are in the first day of a 12-week program should not be who you are at the 12th week. And you have to understand that you have to give yourself time to transition, to make, like you said, one change every week or 2 weeks. Have certain levels of compliance that aren't overwhelming. They're just this much better than you are, right? Not this much. There has to be I think this is also good because this is going into like comfort zone, uncomfortable zone. This is your comfort zone. You have to go a little bit past it, just a little. You don't have to put yourself and push a pace of someone who's a professional in that field. So I think the way we use time is often incorrect and it's rushed. We might need to slow down and take a different mindset.
I think also with that, when it comes to society right now, and people can scroll through on social media fast, and they start, looking at other people and comparing themselves. And then with all the work they think they're putting in, why aren't I like that? They ask themselves, we're circling back to that why question. And they're not why aren't I getting these results as fast as this person has? Or, why can't I look like this? And people are expecting results so much faster than they really can get there. And that's why when we're talking about one thing at a time, take your time. You don't need to go from 0 to 100 as fast as you can. It's all about accepting who you are and not, like Joe said, not lying to yourself. When you you have to really sit down and say, if what I want is really my top priority and I'm putting in this amount of work and you're saying, why aren't I getting to that point? Really ask yourself, are you lying to yourself because you know how much work it really takes, and are you doing that? And if that's the case, then you need to reevaluate maybe what you're doing is not working, or you're just straight up lying to yourself, right?
Yeah, just a quick bounce off that. In the beginning of that, you said, we look at social media, and I heard someone say in a podcast earlier about how we're seeing the end result. We're seeing the years of hard work, the highlight reel of these people's success, but none of the meal prepping, none of the waking up at 5 o'clock and going for runs. It's good to model, right? It's good to model yourself after successful people, but you have to understand what those successful people have done, what they've sacrificed to get that success. This is really important when you're modeling, and social media can be tough because you're just seeing, like you said, a highlight reel of them.
So, what's cool is actually we're all in businesses that have super high turnover, because all of you probably know about 40 different t-shirt companies that have popped up over the last 5 years. And how many of those people are still in business, right? And how many trainers you've met. Like, to me, it's always funny when I see a new trainer at Equinox, I have a conversation with them. I know in like 35 seconds if they're going to last or not.
Yeah.
Right? Because you know the people that are like there and ready to grind.
Yep.
And the people that are just like, well, it should just be like really easy because it's all rich people here. And that's not the fact, right? Like, and the reason both of you have such long tenures there is because you grind, right? And like you have slow times, you have better times, but you're still there. And I take a pride in like being a grinder, right? And and just kind of like being a professional shit eater sometimes. And it's really because like I've seen it pay off, right? Like the more times you have shit eating pay off, the easier it is to eat shit, right? Where like some person, they don't want to eat shit once. They're like, no, I'm better than this. And it's just like, no, you gotta grind. And the fact is, like, either one of you, I could put you into any sort of business, sales, marketing job, whatever, you'll make money, right? Because you're willing to hear no. And it goes back to everything. And it's funny is like that willing to hear no doesn't always transition to other parts of our life, right?
Totally.
Because like I'm really good at like getting shot down by girls. It's just like a numb thing to me. It's like, you're gonna say no to me. Same thing with knocking on doors. Like I can cold canvas a neighborhood and not be stressed and be told to go screw myself and terrible things about my mother all day long. It won't even bother me, and I'll just knock on the next door. But then there's certain environments, right? Like I could talk to a million chicks online and be whatever. You put me in a bar, that is the most uncomfortable position for me to talk to women. And people are like, what's the difference? You could knock on someone's door randomly. I don't know, bars are weird. Like I can tell myself a million reasons why that's not a comfortable position for me. So you have to start realizing that, if you're struggling in a certain area, there's a reason why. And really the reason for me is I never really had to pick up girls in a bar. So I never got used to it. It was never my environment. So I just didn't have to do it. People say, oh, how do you sell door to door? I did it for like 10 years. So I can sell door to door anything. I remember when I first started knocking on doors, I would knock on a door and hope the person didn't answer, just because I didn't want to get yelled at, and this, well, if I knock all the doors and nobody answers, then it's not my fault I failed. Right. Like
what that really is coming down to is, like you said, repetition. And just like the kids and babies, they have repetition of getting up and falling down, getting up and falling down. And when it comes down to changing your habits, you have repetition. It's all about repetition. And I guess when we start to think about it in mindset, acceptance and being okay with failure and learning what you can and can't control is just all about that repetition. Figuring it out, taking note, doing it again, trying to figure it out, give yourself time, take note, and then keep doing that over and over. And you'll get to a point where, like Joe is, looking at everything in a more positive light, right?
Look, man, if you could sell me an upside of being negative, I would be negative all day.
Yeah.
Like, give me one thing that I will gain from being negative, and I'm sold. Because like negative is super easy. And actually what's really funny is like brief moment in school, I studied circuitry, and a circuit without a positive charge floats negative, right? So unless there's actually electric being put to a circuit, it's always going to test as negative. Right? And our minds are the same way, right? Without a positive charge, you're going to float negative. Like, I don't have to get out of bed to be miserable. I can do that with my pillow in my bed. But to be like happy and to be positive, like I have to go do things, right? I have to put a charge to my life. And when you start realizing that, it's just, look, it's okay to fall, right? And what we see on social media is bullshit, dude. All right, like people have thought I've had way more of a successful t-shirt company when I was failing, right? You know what I mean? Oh, you have 30,000 Instagram followers. Guess how many sales that was? Not a lot, right? Like, you know, oh, you have this. Oh, you have a famous friend who tweets your stuff out. You know, right now, where I've done less on social media than I've done in the entire 6 years of my business, I sell more t-shirts a day. Right. And like nobody even knows what's going on. I still get people like, oh, you're still doing that t-shirt thing?
Yeah. It's about being invisible. When you're visible, that's when people know you're doing the work, right?
Yeah, dude. It's like Dr. Sean's had a meme up one time and it said it takes years to become an overnight success.
Yeah, I've seen that one before, for sure.
That is my favorite because that's the truth, right? Like, even when I got into shape when I was with you and I got into crazy shape, everybody was like, oh man, like you just got in shape before the summer. I'm like, no, I've been training with a trainer since November.
Yeah.
Right? Like I haven't eaten a carb or looked at bread in 2 years, right? Like, you know, and you look at that stuff, but people don't see that. And they're like, well, what was the secret? Was just having him as a trainer just made you in shape? No, I was with him 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
Right? So what else went on? And, you have to just have a mindset of just being, all right, I'm ready to work, I'm ready to learn, and it's okay if I fail, right? Like Major League Baseball players, if you bat 275, you make a few million a year, right? So 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 times you're fucking up and failing.
Yeah.
Right? But nobody looks at that, right? Like, you know, when you look at a Derek Jeter who probably had a career batting average of like 270, somewhere around that, do you think when it was the bottom of the ninth and 3 runners on, he was like, man, I struck out 3 times today, I'm not going to do this? Or he's like, no, you know what? The odds are in my favor. 1 out of 4, that's usually about me. Let's do this. Right? Yeah. Like, and it all goes back to just really understanding that, like, it's okay, right? And that that's why I find one of my favorite speakers is actually Zig Ziglar. And he would always start his things about talking about how much he was a terrible salesperson. And he would say, like, you know, when I first got into sales, I sold a lot of things. I sold my couch. I sold my TV. I sold, like, he had to sell all these things to pay his bills. And his wife would go to him like, why do you have to tell people this? She's like, it's so embarrassing. And he goes, how will they know they can do it too if they don't know how bad we had it? Right? And like, that's my favorite speakers is when people talk about like, no, dude, I was not awesome from the beginning. You know, I screwed up constantly. I made these mistakes because like, that's human, right? Like one of the closest moments I ever had with my dad in my entire life was when I was 16 years old. We had this fish pond and he used to put a little bit of bleach in it every day. And this is actually like to kill the allergy, right? Just like, and I'm talking about thousands of gallons, a little drop of bleach. But one day he screwed up, and he put too much bleach and killed all the fish. I mean, thousands of dollars of food.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, like 10 years of growing fish, right? And you know, he had hit a point in his life where he had just gotten divorced, and a lot of things were going wrong. And he's in the kitchen, he's crying, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he's like, I killed all the fish, and da da da, and this and the other thing. He's like, I can't do anything right. And I was like, what'd you just say? Right? Because prior to that, my dad was, I'm invincible. I have never been wrong in my entire life. I've never lied. I'm perfect. All right? And that was my vision of my dad.
Yeah.
But like that one moment where he stepped back and he was human, I was like, I love this man. Yeah. Right? And it completely changed our relationship because I knew I was like him. And that's really what, like, you know, being open and vulnerable and it changes everything because you can have that mindset of being like, okay with failing publicly.
Yeah.
You know, because
speaking of, you know, failing publicly and being open and, you know, I'd like to ask you, and maybe Scott, you want to get on this too, because you gave Scott a great testimonial just now. There are things that, you know, when we assess who we are, we like to say, I'm good at this, and then say, you know, assess what we're not good at too. And sometimes, like we said before, we create movies. So just asking you as a friend, you know, being a little selfish here, what do you think I'm good at, I need work at? You know, just as like, you know, me reaching out to you as almost like a coach, because this is all Scott and I do. We're always coaching people. And maybe one of my personal flaws for sure, like we've talked before, is that I don't reach out enough. I don't get enough help, enough coaching in all areas of life.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to ask you really quick, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think I'm not good at? And what would be your honest assessment, is to put myself on the stage and just be honest and vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know if you realize, like, how captivating you can be, right? Like, you can get a group of people to listen to you and you can talk. And you can draw them in, and you can take a genuine interest in multiple people in a conversation, which is impressive. Because usually someone just, like, lasers in on someone and it seems like they're only talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
But you can kind of bounce through a conversation, kind of run like a group talk really well. But, like, I think what you struggle with, and a lot of us struggle with, is just finishing, right? Like, I think that's the most common thing. And I think that's the thing people think they're so unique about. Oh, I'm a great starter. Well, everyone's great at fucking starting, right? Like, starting's fun, right? The first 3 minutes of my run is really fun.
Nice and easy.
Yeah, especially when I hit the downhill part of my block. It is awesome, right? But when I'm, coming back on the second mile, after almost 2 miles, and now I'm starting to go uphill, and like my calves hurt, and my shins suck, and like everything else is going wrong, walking seems really good. And, I read something somewhere that talked about that people who don't finish tasks have low self-esteem. And it's because they don't feel like they deserve the validation of completing something. And it really struck me to the core, because I think about how many things that I like, projects I leave unfinished in the backyard or whatever. So now literally when I get to a point where I don't want to finish something and I want to go screw off, do you have low self-esteem? Do you not think you're worth completing something? And like, that's the narrative in my head with it. And if you could take that back, Ross, is like, why am I not finishing these things? Why am I making commitments that I'm not following through with? And more importantly, why am I making commitments that maybe I never wanted to follow through?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you don't want to do something, don't commit to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't care who's telling you you should be doing this with your life. Tell them to go screw themselves.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's like what you need to be happy, right? And where's your satisfaction? Where's the comfort going to come in your heart about what you're doing with your life? And instead of just, maybe instead of asking people so much of like what you should be doing, just start telling yourself what you should be doing, right? Because like, you know it better than anyone, right? Like, if I took everyone else's advice on what I should be doing with my life, I'd be selling stuff right now, like a regular, like I'd be a car salesman, a real estate, or I'd be doing other stuff instead of like making really funny T-shirts out of my garage, right? And
see, Joe's in the captaincy right now, and he's so comfortable in this spot right now, and this is when he shines for sure. And for Ross and I, we as coaches and the hosts of the podcast, we want to show vulnerability. It's a hard word for me to say for some reason, but we want to show that because we want to be honest with our audience, and that's something that just like we're saying on this podcast, you got to be real. You can't lie, and it's all about being okay with that.
Yeah, and there's like, look, I struggle with the word stethoscope. Yeah, that's a tricky one for me. And look, dude, for me, it's such a common thing. Like, I'm a terrible reader.
Mm-hmm.
And I can openly say I cannot sound out a word. I read from memory. I had a reading teacher as a kid. I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
And for years, it held me back from education.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And until I found audiobooks, and then I just consumed data. And I found a way that I like to learn, right? And it's the amount of men I've spoken to who I say, like I have issues reading. They go, yeah, I'm dyslexic, right? And like, I know more dyslexic people in the last 2 years since I've been honest about my reading issues than I've ever knew existed. I probably can list like 7 dyslexic people off the top of my head right now. And it's just like, you would think like dyslexia is not that common. Actually, it's wildly common. Damon Johns, the guy from FUBU, from Shark Tank, he's dyslexic.
Yeah.
And he talks about it always giving issues in his career growing up. But like, we're fortunate we're moving out of the era of like, we don't tell people our problems, right? Because like that was my family's generation. You know, I grew up in a house with domestic violence and alcoholism, and it was never spoken about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you know, now, so that's more of a normal thing to talk to and deal with, and you can grow from that. Like there's strength in like the scars, right? And there's beauty from that growth. And you know, even with mental anguish, it's the same thing as muscle soreness, right? Like when my legs are sore after a heavy deadlift day or something, I'm not sitting there like, man, this sucks. I'm like, oh yeah, they're growing, right? Like I'm happy they're sore,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you should feel the same way when you're going through something emotionally and you feel that pain, because there's growth there. You know, like, it's how do you associate pain? Is it this sucks, this hurts, or I'm getting better, I'm getting stronger?
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
And to be selfish, my turn.
Go.
Joe, what can I be better at and what am I great at?
Dude, it's, you can just jump in and make people like you. You know, and you're a great role model. You know, you saw that especially with your interactions with Steve and other new trainers. You know, you're definitely someone when they come in and they say, man, like I want what that guy has. And to me, that's the best compliment you could ever get, is someone looking at you and saying, your life is what I want. Because like I know plenty of people who I look at their lives and I don't want that shit. You know, I have a friend who's pretty wealthy, and I look at his day to day and I go, I would never trade spots with you. But you know, you're living a full life, and that's pretty impressive, right? You know, you have a relationship you're constantly working on. It's not impressive to have a relationship. It's impressive to have a relationship that you work on. You know, because anybody can have a relationship. You find, you know, someone that's dumb enough to deal with your bullshit, they'll just sit in your, you know, house all day and love you because you pay their bills. But like to actually have someone that you're gonna have a back and forth with means so much more. And you know, if you had to work on anything, it would just be stepping out of your comfort zone, because like your comfort zone is like working on your house, doing personal training, and you know, hunting, right? Like any of those things, you're good, right? But when it comes to business otherwise, I think as soon as you realize it's the same exact thing you've been doing with personal training with everything else, and you get past the idea of like, I don't know what I'm doing with this other businesses, you'll be fine. You know, I had a friend tell me the same thing. He was just, because for a long time I would say, I'm a guy that has no business owning a t-shirt company. And he goes, and if you don't stop telling yourself that narrative, you will always be a guy that has no business owning a t-shirt company.
Yeah.
And it was so crippling, and I didn't realize. I took it as like a claim to fame that I didn't know what I was doing, and I was still running a company. And he goes, no, but you do, right? Like, look at what you're doing. You are running a company. You know what you're doing. So we all have to kind of do that with ourselves when we step into something. It's the same thing, dude. It's
you know what you're saying, and I appreciate you for saying all those things. I thank you for that. If I compare what you kind of said about me and what about Ross, and there's similarities there, and it's about saying to yourself, I deserve this.
Yeah.
I deserve what I want, and I'm able to get it as long as it's something realistic, setting those realistic, you know, points in time or goals, that you might call it. I deserve those things, and I'm gonna reach it. So I guess we can kind of list it off and kind of wrap this up. And what I would say is, when it comes to mindset, I think allowing yourself to be okay with the failure, learning from it, you know, telling yourself that you still deserve what you want. And I'm sure you guys can add a few things to that. What would you guys say?
Well, listen, I think the greatest thing is being honest with yourself and reaching out to some level of a coach who's going to cut that movie off. They're going to turn that movie off, and they're going to make it a documentary, and they're actually going to tell you what you're doing, how you're acting, where your habits really are, and if they're geared toward being successful at whatever it is you want to do. This is why people come to Scott and I for personal training and nutritional advice, because we're honest to them. We're not going to sugarcoat things like their husband or wife may be, or their children, we're going to be honest with them, and we're going to say, listen, I'm saying this with love, but this doesn't work. You have to get rid of this type of mindset. You have to integrate this type of food, whatever it may be, but, making the small steps from there, and then not going in too crazy, stepping out of your comfort zone, but not using the pinnacle of the goal as where you want to be in 2 weeks. Just saying what's a little bit better. How can I be a little bit better every single day, but taking on those small goals. I think that's,
I like that. Yeah.
Kind of what I want to finish with.
I think it's a culmination of being accepting of yourself, right, and where you're at. And also realizing, like, if you've had a failure that day, well, that was the best you could do that day. Well, I should have worked harder. No. You did everything that was in your ability that day. You think you could have done more, but if you could have, you would have, right? Like, if I wanted to, call more people that day, I would have. But there was something that stopped me in my growth that said, I can't do that. I'm not ready. I have to hold back. So accepting that, like, I did as best as I could today, tomorrow can be a better day. And, I've had a couple things that popped in my head. I want to add these in. Is a long time ago, I had a friend of mine tell me to write out, like, the characteristics of my perfect partner, right? Like, write out the girl to a T. Is she funny, good looking, da-da-da. Oh, and I come up with this massive list. And he goes, okay, cool. So what on that list are you? And he goes, what we look for in other people is what we're actually looking for in ourselves. He's like, and you can't expect to bring somebody else into your life if you can't do that for them too. And over the years, anytime I've been in a situation where I'm single, I'm like, well, what in that list am I not working on? Right. And it goes back to, like, having a plan for my own life, just about who I want it to be, on a basic spiritual level of, like, being caring, understanding, loving, and being that person. And, Scott, you did this with me during our, my assessment, was you had me write out my day. And hour by hour, we went through what my day looked like. And at the end of the day, you said, is this manageable? Like, you do this every day? Is this okay? It's just what I do. And I never had taken a chance to step back and look at my work day and my social life, and just that it was miserable. So, well, how can we fix this? Well, we can add in some better meals. We can change this. You can do that. But it was because I had someone else to bounce it off of. And really, the whole mindset here is just being open to discuss with other people, right? And being okay with being vulnerable. And the more you share your inner thoughts with other people, the less unique you feel. And I go back to, like, my reading issues, and the more I've shared that with other people, the more I've found people say, dude, I'm just like that.
You know what? I had a reading teacher in 4th and 5th grade and 6th grade for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not the greatest reader, and especially reading out loud.
Oh God,
it suck. You know,
I'd rather kill myself.
Yeah. But all these things are just great, and I know us three, we've already done this. We could talk for hours, absolute hours, and I'd just like to wrap it up and say thank you, Joe. We really appreciate you coming on to Sweaty Alpha. I want to give you a little plug, obviously, at the end. So tell everyone where they can find you and your work.
You can find me if you go on Etsy. It's the easiest place, and type in T-shirt jerks. We have a ton of stuff right now. A bunch of nurse shirts too. If you have a friend that's a nurse and you want to support them. We also have another shirt that's a color in yourself T-shirt that I partnered with Josh from Liquid Marks on, and it actually comes with a pack of markers, and you can color in the shirt. It's a good gift for a kid that's stuck at home and says stay at home right now. But yeah, again, T-shirt jerks on Etsy, and dude, both of you, like, this is a conversation like we would have just had at the gym.
Yeah,
right? We just had this conversation go on for an hour, so it was cool to do this. It was a blast, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon when the world is not dying anymore.
Joe, thank you so much. I got to go write some goals now, so I'm going to have to get off. No, that was fantastic. That was really good. And the greatest thing is that we hope with this podcast that we connect to people, and that they find something about themselves that they can either improve or do a little bit better. And I know every podcast we've done so far, Scott, I felt like I've taken something for myself and have become a little bit better person.
100%.
Today I think Joe added so much content, and I took a lot away from it. And thank you very much. That was great.
Yeah, it definitely makes me think about myself for sure. And every time I click stop recording and I go downstairs and talk to Sam, I'm like so freaking excited. We're like, I crushed it. I'm ready to get another one. And that's what it's all about. And I hope that, if you are listening to this, please share it with a friend. If you feel like you are kind of feeling the same exact things we're feeling, take a screenshot of it on Spotify, share it to your story, tag us. We want to see that you're listening, and we really appreciate it. So thank you. Thank you, Joe. Ross, you're the man. We'll see you till next time. The Sweaty Health Podcast.